Okay, folks, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And as required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a decision on these applications. First of all, I'll introduce the committee members, and we are utilizing a hybrid system here, so bear with me while I go through this. I'm Mr. Robertson, and we've got Ms. Richardson, Ms. Archer, Mr. Strangway, and remotely we have Ms. Robinson. And we have, first of all, congratulations on your win, Councillor Yeo, and welcome back. Yeah, very good. All righty. And I don't see, have we got Mr. Marsh remotely? I don't think so. No? All right. And let's see, our staff here, we've got Mr. Lahi, who is the Secretary-Treasurer. We've got Ms. Berry, the Manager of Planning. We've got Megan Peck, who is Planner 2, and she's sitting in to, she's kind of going to be very critical about how we operate here today. She's evaluating us, I guess, maybe. No. Welcome, Megan. We appreciate you taking the time. And maybe our most important person here is Ms. Crockford, our Recording Secretary. All righty. And remotely, we have our Chief Building Official, Ms. Murchison. So I think I got everyone. All right. Are there any comments or questions with respect to the agenda as printed? Being none, can I get a motion to adopt that? Ms. Archer, Mr. Strangway? For this, I'll just do the, all those in favor? All right. I will also advise that when we get to the applications and when we're doing motions with respect to the applications, I'm going to, because we're operating under this hybrid system, I'm going to be asking for a recorded vote. So just so you're aware of that. All right. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Just before Christmas, no one's got any money. All right. Now, are there any comments or questions with respect to the minutes of the last meeting? All right, being none, can I have motion? Ms. Richardson, Councillor Yode, I see your hand there. All right. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, for the benefit of those here and those remotely online, the committee will hear comments, gather information, and may ask questions to clarify statements made. The committee may ask and answer questions or redirect questions to the appropriate person. Please note that any information or comments given to the committee during the meeting, they're considered evidence. We will first hear from staff, then the applicant or his or her agent. We will then hear from any person in support of or from those who have questions, concerns, or are opposed to the application. Finally, the applicant or his or her agent will have an opportunity to respond to any of the statements that were made. And if you decide that you wish to speak, I would like to see, when you come on the screen, please give us your name, and we will afford you 10 minutes to give your presentation. No one has ever taken 10 minutes. In fact, they're usually much shorter than that, but if you find you just can't possibly get all that information in the 10 minutes, I will ask the committee if they would afford you a couple of more minutes to finish. So I just want to advise everyone of that. But as you said, normally the presentations are much, much shorter than that. Okay. We are starting with number one then, is file number, get it here, oh my goodness, D20-2022-069 and D03-2022-025, and this is 4232 Highway 7, Geographic Township of Emily. And go ahead, Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you will indulge me just for a moment here, I will collect the report. Thanks.
Someone's got some information for you there, I believe, Ms. Berry.
Very good. Thank you for that indulgence, Mr. Chair. We are at 4232 Highway 7, and we're doing something a little different, or at least something that the committee may not have seen in recent years. Let's put it that way. We are presenting today both a minor variance as well as its companion consent application in an attempt to both streamline the application process and to afford this committee an opportunity to make decisions on both applications concurrently. All right, so what we see on the screen in front of us is an identification of the subject land on the left. That is the parcel subject of the minor variance. On the right is an indication of what the companion consent would effectively do. So that indicates to us the smaller severed lot and the larger retained parcel. The consent application is to correct title as it happens. These lots previously did exist as separate lots of record, and according to the owner, have merged on title. To correct title in order to effect a sale, a land transfer, in an abundance of caution, the owner has been advised to apply for the consent to correct title and to clean up title, so to speak, in order to have the land transfer take effect. In order to do this, we require the minor variance to recognize the lot area of that subject parcel, and we will go ahead and tell you why we think that this is a good idea, represents good planning, and should be approved. Outlined on the screen is the severed parcel. And here is a site plan that indicates the use of both the severed and the retained land. The two adjacent properties, mutually known as 4232 Highway 7, as well as 4236 Highway 7, have historically existed as separate lots. The severed parcel, 4232, the smaller of the two, has contained a gas bar and a convenience store in the past. In the passage of time, the gas pumps have been removed, and the remaining building is boarded up, and we will see a photo in this regard in just a moment. The larger parcel, adjacent at 4236 Highway 7, contains a car dealership and repair shop. No changes to use are proposed there. There are no new buildings, structures, or uses proposed through either the minor variance or the consent applications. Though the applications are indicative of what I've just described, as a result of circulation to our commenting partners, we now understand that as a result of approval of these applications, should that be the desire of this committee, through our Part 8 sewage supervisor, Ann Elmhurst, we're aware that the septic permit that's been applied for also proposes the reactivation or the reopening of the former convenience store. Similarly, from circulating to the building division for comments, we are aware that there are pending building permits that would do two things. One, permit the construction of the retail use, the convenience store, and also the gas station canopy. So we are proceeding with evaluating the merits of both the variance and the consent, recognizing that it is possible that should all the appropriate permits be obtained, not just from the city, but also from the Ministry of Transportation, that the proposal in the future, should that take place, to reactivate the convenience store and the gas bar. These are permitted uses in the zone and do not change. Our conclusions and our recommendation still stands. As it relates to matters of provincial interest, and specifically policies around mineral resource areas, we provided a brief comment on growth plan and provincial policy statement conformity as is conventional and necessary when reviewing a consent application. It's not anticipated that the proposed severance would hinder any new aggregate operations or access, given the existing developed nature of the subject lands. You will have seen in the schedule to the report that this property and some adjacent properties are subject to the city's official plan sand and gravel resource designation, and hence the connection to the mineral resource area policies in the growth plan and the PPS. So moving to the official plan, we'll take that evaluation a step further and speak to the sand and gravel resource designation just for a moment. The policies would support the recreation or continuation or even reactivation of the former uses, not generating any land use compatibility constraints here, not generating a potential aggregate operation or licensed aggregate operation incompatibility. The abutting designation, which is important when evaluating reactivation of use within a sand and gravel resource designation. The abutting designation is rural, and the existing uses, or again, reactivation of the former uses, would be permitted to continue. The existing uses are permitted in the highway commercial zone, the C2 zone. The reduced lot area that would be affected through the minor variance is acceptable given the nature of the use. Should it be reactivated? The sewage system design indicates there's adequate space to install a Class 4 septic tank and leaching bed that would accommodate a retail use. The overall reduction would be a minimization from the minimum 4,000 square meters to about 2,727 square meters. So in evaluating the policy framework for both the minor variance and consent, we can conclude that we don't anticipate any negative impacts on environmental features, on surrounding property owners, or on the use of the right-of-way, Highway 7. Now I'll just spend a moment referring to Highway 7 further. As a result of circulation, we did receive comments from the Ministry of Transportation. MTO permits are required prior to any construction or alteration of the land at this site. MTO also reminds us that their permits are required to be obtained before the municipality is permitted to issue any related building permits or septic permits in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. No further comments of any concern from the circulated agencies. We have received 2 written submissions from surrounding property owners. First, from Bill and Joanne Collins at 4230 Highway 7, concerns include the possibility of fencing being installed. The concern here is that if fencing were to be installed, this could result in some significant impacts from snow blowing and drifting onto their driveway. There was a further concern about the possibility of their well being impacted by new uses. We received a written submission from the property owner at 4213 Highway 7 as well. This is from John Shannon. To summarize, in his opinion, approval of the variance for the recognition of the reduction in lot area and the correction of title to affect the land sale would relate directly to it or be commensurate with the council's support of future traffic issues, water supply issues, sewage capacity issues, and I'll say further traffic issues. Mr. Shannon, in his comments, had outlined his observations over a number of years, and his opinion is that as a result of perhaps poor lane design and the lack of suitable signage indicating turning lanes, that these would inevitably exacerbate traffic and potentially traffic problems accessing the site. Certainly should it be reused for the uses it once was used for. Also noted concerns in the past with excessive litter in the ditches and on his property. we're able to make the connection between the observation of litter being a result, again, according to Mr. Shannon, a result of the previous retail use that was on the site. So for the benefit of the committee, I'll just note that any sort of possible or potential fencing that a future owner may be interested in erecting would have to, of course, be in accordance with the zoning bylaw. And we also just restate for the committee's benefit that the current zoning on both the to be severed and to be retained parcels permits the former uses, the current existing uses, and should the uses be reactivated, would continue to permit them. Now, specifically with respect to the concerns over traffic, given this is a provincial area of jurisdiction, we did forward Mr. Shannon's concerns to the MTO and asked that they consider these comments for any further merit when contemplating issuance of permits, when and if that time comes. Mr. Chair, for the committee's benefit, we have included a series of conditions of approval that would relate both to the consent, those are found in the appendix, and as they relate to the approval of the minor variance on page 1. All sort of standard operating procedure in that regard. So we recommend approval. And before we tie this up, we'll just take a quick look at the on-site particulars. Here is the entrance into what would be the retained parcel, identifying the parking area for the car dealership. To the right, and we'll take a look at that a little more closely in a minute, is what used to be the retail store. Now, this is approaching the site from, as we head out of Omemee, so towards Peterborough, heading east, just to indicate and I'll do my best here to indicate with the laser pointer, and to those who can't see the laser, I'm pointing to the larger structures in the background behind the car dealership, part of the retained parcel, just to indicate what we might not have been able to see in the previous photo from the road. And here we are looking at what is the white structure, boarded up, formerly the retail use. We can also identify the concrete pads, what is left of the former gas bar on the lands to be severed. Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions of the manager? Ms. Richardson, go ahead.
Through you, do they share a driveway, the retained and the severed, or do they have two separate driveways?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, I'll just indicate on the site plan that there are separate driveways to each of the parcels. We have a driveway entrance on the extreme, left of the page to the severed, and more centrally here towards the right for the retained.
Follow up? Anything else from committee? Ms. Archer, go ahead.
Through you, please. When it comes time to do the building, is that when we would be concerned, if it passes here, we would be concerned about sufficient area for parking for visitors on the property?
Mr. Chair, if I could ask the member just to elaborate. I'm not sure I caught the either the concern, if there is one, or the nature of the question. Forgive me, is it a question regarding is there enough parking to substantiate the use?
Basically that, yes. Do we concern with that now or at a different stage if they have to come back to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. If there was a concern that there was insufficient parking for the use if it were reactivated, that would have to come back to the Committee of Adjustment unless the use was to be altered in size or form in some way where parking could be entirely accommodated.
Yes, Ms. Richardson, go ahead.
Sorry, just to follow up to my driveway question. If I recall, in the past, you entered from the one driveway to get your gas, and then you would go exit through the other one, which is technically the driveway to the retained portion.
Mr. Chair, I will attempt to direct us to the photo in answer to the member's question, there is a bit of an island that separates the traveled portion of the right-of-way from the driveway that leads into the severed area, and there's actually the ability to come in from the left and the right of this island exclusively on the severed area. As we move east, from that sort of, I won't quite say circular driveway, but from the two access points, there's a grassed buffer that separates the former gas bar retail use from the driveway into the retained parcel. I hope this clarifies the location of what actually is more like 3 driveways as opposed to just 2.
Anything further, committee?
I know this probably isn't our concern, but what about contaminated soil since there was a gas bar there at one time?
Through to the member, certainly in the spirit of good planning principles, always a concern. There isn't any reason that has been indicated to us that we would need to be concerned with a former misuse or indication that there was any soil contamination from the former use. I hope that that addresses at least part of your concerns, if not all of them.
Anything further? Just a couple from me, and I'm reading through the report, and this is probably a moot question, but on page 2 of 7 at the bottom there, the proponent is of the opinion that the lots have merged. We're assuming, because of this report, that they obviously did merge. Would that be a true statement?
Mr. Chair, staff has the ability to review title searches. We aren't lawyers, and we wouldn't endeavor to provide a legal opinion. Through our research of the property and looking at the sort of history of conveyances, we offered a suggestion to the owner that it would be advantageous, or it may be advantageous, for them to enlist the services of their solicitor to do a further title search and to provide a legal opinion on the status of the lands. We were of the impression and understanding, still to this day, that the lands do in fact exist as 2 separate lots of record, period. The abundance of caution that is being taken by the owner is one way of addressing doing a title search alternatively. To have clean title, so to speak, and to not encumber or possibly contravene the Planning Act when a sale takes place from one owner to another. But as I say, based on the documentation that was provided at a preliminary stage when the owner was first exploring the potential to get us to where we are today, we did offer, from a planning perspective, an opinion that it appeared that the lands were still held in separate ownership. Now, it isn't uncommon for matters like this to come in to clean up the title and to make a transaction ultimately saleable. And so should the application come in under the Planning Act and should it be complete and meet all the prescribed criteria, we are in a not just position to, but are required to process that application. And so our opinion matters not in that regard. Our planning opinion matters in all other ways. So that is why we can support these applications, again, in an abundance of caution.
Yeah, I asked that question because I know there are costs associated with severances. So, and I guess that's why I asked, because would there be, if they are in fact 2 separate lots, why would we be at this point exploring a severance? But
Mr. Chair, it's a fair question, and excuse me, we certainly asked the same one to ensure that the property owner has all options available in front of them to decide which path they would like to go. There are costs associated with both this Planning Act process and the outcomes of any decisions, of course, that the committee may make, and the potential risks that are involved with processing Planning Act applications. Of course, there are also costs associated with doing a title search and enlisting the services of a solicitor to undertake that work. This was the the route that the owner elected to take.
The other question I have, and I think you answered it already, was, but it just sort of threw me off course here when I was reading through the report, and all of a sudden we're talking about sand and gravel resource. What's that got to do with anything? But I guess it's designated as such, so we're obligated to identify that in the report.
Confirming you're correct, yes.
Any further questions? Ms. Archer?
Through you, please. On Exhibit, or Appendix C, rather, it's the applicant's sketch of the property. It looks to me like the island is on Highway 7 property. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the member, I would agree with you that on the applicant's sketch, the location of the island does appear to be outside of the, let's say, lines that are indicative of the property boundaries. However, we're not looking at a survey, so I would be reluctant to conclude definitively that that island is precisely within the entirety of the provincial right-of-way.
It's just my concern is if they have to move it, then that will lose, like if they have to move it inside, that'll take away a lot more property from where they're going to put their gas bar, I would think. We don't have to deal with that right now.
Something we might be able to explore with the applicant as well, so, yeah, all right. Are there any further questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to respond to this application? And your name, sir?
It's Tom DeBoer with TD Consulting, representing the owner of the property.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Roberts, just to clarify your concern, because it was a concern of mine in my office as well as to why we were taking this path. We have had multiple discussions with the owner's solicitor, and it was their opinion that a clean, clear title was inconsistent at best. So in order to solidify this, as Ms. Berry had alluded to, that we in turn, we're going to go through this process to ensure 100% certainty of clear title, which allows them to sell each component of this property or properties individually or collectively. So that's the purpose of this. And yes, there was another mechanism. We did investigate that, but I couldn't get the solicitor without a shadow of a doubt to sign a letter saying that they are separate and distinct properties available for sale. So that's why we're here today. Second of all, the last question with regards to the plans themselves, there were representation of the property. However, a lot of the detail of that property was through aerial photography. So as Ms. Berry has alluded, it is not a plan of survey, and therefore it was for graphical presentation for this purpose. When and if the property does sell, the applicant would obviously have the onus to obtain a legal and topographical survey to prove what is available to them for the redevelopment of the property. Aside from that, I just want to thank city staff for assisting us in this application. And if there's any questions or concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
All right, and thank you for that, sir. Other questions of the applicant? Ms. Archer?
For you, please, to Mr. DeBoer, can you confirm that the where the to be severed property is, those are the exact same dimensions as what we think we have two deeds for?
That is correct. So the boundary in itself, in terms of its parts and pieces, are confirmed through plans that were done at some time in history. So the dimensions and such are correct. It's just the actual physical features within those boundaries need to be surveyed to formalize the process.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you taking the time. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to this application? Yeah, all right. Mr. Kennedy, do you wish to speak to the application? Shannon? Let's try Mr. Shannon then. Do you wish to speak to the application? All right. Well, I'm going to suggest then if he does have comments and he wishes to share them, perhaps he could deal with the planning staff. Oh, did I see something? No. But be that he may wish to discuss it further with planning if we're not able to connect here. So I'll give him another minute or so, but does it look like he's attempting to? Well, I'm not going to hold up the application then, so, all right. Is there anyone else online wishing to speak in opposition to this application, in opposition to the application? Committee. Ms. Richardson.
As recommended by staff.
All right. A seconder, Councillor Yeo. All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All right. Mr. Richardson, yea or nay? In favor? Councillor Yeo?
In favor?
Ms. Robinson?
In favor.
All right. Ms. Archer? Mr. Strangway?
In favor.
And I'm in favor. All right. Thank you. It's your application is approved, Mr. DeBoer.
Okay, sorry.
If he's there, let him speak, but I'll advise him that. Go ahead, Mr. Shannon, if you're there. Well, please advise him if you do connect with him that he can speak further with planning staff. Ms. Barry, yep. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add as well for the benefit of the record, Mr. Shannon's comments were circulated to committee members and they have had an opportunity to review them.
Absolutely. It's just, if he can't speak here, I'm just suggesting that if he has further, he may discuss it with yourself. Moving right along, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-066, and this is 248 John Street, Geographic Township of Members. And again, Ms. Barry, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so we are at 248 John Street. We are dealing with the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw, which is, written in a format that is, in some ways and capacities, a little different to many of the zoning bylaws that the committee is used to seeing more frequently. So the nature of the relief being asked for may appear as though there are pieces that are overlapping, provisions that are overlapping. That said, we are confident that we've captured all of the intricacies of the Oak Ridges Moraine zoning bylaw. And let me continue on with the story and tell you a little bit more about what is proposed. The effect of the variance, should it be approved, would be to facilitate a second story to the existing home on the property, and also to replace a garage that is in the rear yard with a new garage. Now, we are in the hamlet of Pontypool, in this case, and the home dates back quite a number of years, in fact, to the 1850s. I tell a lie, the 1870s. I was off by a couple decades. Nonetheless, certainly predates the zoning bylaw, and a number of existing non-compliances are the result. So what the application is capturing, or at least attempting to provide relief from, would be the side yard setback for the garage from what is required 6 meters down to 2.7 meters. Again, side yard setback, this time a reduction needing to recognize the fact that the height of the proposed garage is higher than 4.3 meters. However, don't be fooled, 4.3 meters is not the maximum permitted height for the garage. A separate provision indicates that the height requirement is actually 5 meters. That is the maximum permitted height. So at 6.1 meters, what is proposed, relief is needed in that regard. Lot coverage is the next provision seeking relief. The proposal is 12.5% coverage, maximum being 8%. Rear yard setback. In the case of through lots, which this one is, we can see from the aerial photo in front of us, we have 2 streets bounding the lot, Bradley and John. As a result, the rear yard is required to be 15 meters. The existing is 1.8. Lot coverage now for the site, as opposed to just the accessory building. Maximum 25%, proposed is 27.1. Not because the envelope of the home is changing, but because the garage is proposing a slightly larger ground floor area. Finally, the front yard setback, and this is taken from John Street. Requirement for minimum front yard, 15 meters. The proposal is to align the second story with the existing front wall of the home, and that sits at about 1.2 meters. So that, not quite in a nutshell, but anyway, summarizes the relief that's required in order for this redevelopment to take place. All right, so we can return to the site plan if and when needed. We'll show you the elevations that are also included in your report packages to give you an idea of what the owners are proposing, not just for the home, but for the garage in the rear yard. And let's stay here just for a moment while I describe to you a little bit more about what and why the owners are coming forward with this application. So the existing home, and that's indicative from the photo on the left, is about 104 square meters. That's the ground floor. If we take into account the upper level at the front of the home, that actually increases to about 153 square meters. The garage, about 24 square meters, and not quite as old as the home, but still predates the zoning bylaw. It was built from, well, anyway, in the 1950s. As I indicated, describing the relief that was needed, these 2 structures hold numerous non-compliances. The home and garage themselves would benefit from both structural and operational improvements to functionality and to accommodate additional storage on the property. Both larger in size and taller in height, garage serves a couple of purposes for the homeowner. It's intended to provide secure storage for numerous household items while the house is under renovation to add that complete second story. Also, it's to house the owner's woodworking tools, of which are numerous. That equipment is currently being stored off-site, and the owner is quite anxious to get those back on his property. As mentioned, Pontypool is a hamlet. It's considered a rural settlement land use designation in the official plan. Residential uses are permitted in this designation. The residential use is also permitted in the RR1 zone. In addition to the non-compliances, as a result of the buildings predating the bylaw, the location and size of the lot also present redevelopment challenges. So one, this is a through lot. The through lot itself, by its virtue, requires larger setbacks. The lot itself is significantly undersized. The requirements for the private servicing to create a new lot in this zone and designation would be a 2,000 square meter minimum. The lot, as it stands today, is less than half of that. It's 722.6 square meters, so effectively impacting certainly the extent of redevelopment that one would be able to do in compliance with the bylaw without needing relief at all. So notwithstanding the larger footprint and increased height of the garage that I spoke to a moment ago, it still will remain subordinate to the primary dwelling, both in its size and in its nature, what it's used for. The proposed relief is in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood character we observed, both from a built form perspective and from a lot size perspective, that this is a neighborhood that is comprised of a variety of both main dwelling and garage shapes and sizes. The established building line in both cases along both of the rights of way, they reflect significantly reduced yard setbacks on both sides. And what we've understood have achieved a land use compatibility with both the private uses adjacent, but as well the municipal rights of way. And it's on this basis, members and Mr. Chair, that we are able to support from a policy perspective what is being proposed through this application. I would like to take a moment to go through the results of circulation. Although no concerns or issues were identified through our commenting partners, the agencies, we did receive a letter from the owners of 10 Bradley across the street from the property in what effectively would be the rear yard. I'll take us back to the aerial photo and indicates to the right of the parcel is 10 Bradley. I'm circling the house behind 248 John there. The concerns that Mr. and Mrs. Kimball had raised was as a result of the increased height of the garage, and by keeping the setback essentially where it is, that this is anticipated to create considerable shadowing onto the home at 10 Bradley. Now, the living room of the owners is at the front of the home, and the owners have expressed that they've enjoyed the daylight, the sunshine, the warmth that comes through that front living room, and are concerned that the ability for them to continue enjoying their property would be impacted in a negative way as a result of the garage being sited where it's proposed. So we did take a look at, well, a number of factors. Please disregard the lot lines that you see on this aerial photo, and instead let's focus on the location of the home, 10 Bradley, and the traveled portion of the road. So that setback that you're looking at, that front yard, is about 7.5 meters, give or take perhaps a couple of inches. The minimum front yard setback in the zoning bylaw would actually require a new home to be built at double that, so at 15 meters. So I just point that out to give us some, again, idea of the built form in this area, and the fact that not just limited to this property, a number of the surrounding properties also have non-complying zone provisions. Now, again, the existing garage is there, has been there for the better part of 70 years. At that setback, the proposed increase in height would be, well, an increase of about 3.5 feet. The owners did indicate to us, and I will at this point mention that the owners did wish to participate, but did not have the ability to do so via Zoom, but certainly know that they can participate by calling in. And if they had trouble with that, wanted to express to us through email, which we were notified of before the meeting, just a little bit of history of the property. There had for many years been a stand of tall trees in excess of 65 feet. No less than 5 of these tall trees previously surrounding the garage. Sorry, I indicated, if not, that there were 5 of them, which, in the opinion of the owner, would have created possibly some shadowing as well at some point in the past. So although the trees are no longer there, we do take that into consideration. The siting of the existing garage, of course, the existing setback, and overall the impact of the 1.1 meters overall should have a fairly negligible impact. And so, Mr. Chair, we continue to recommend support of the application, and we'll just take a look at some photos on the ground. On the left, we see the house straight on. Then we see both south and north perspectives to get an idea of the existing encroachments of the neighboring homes. Some substantial vegetation, hedgerow, in between the area of reduction for the setback on the side yard. And the garage itself in the rear yard, sort of central in the photo. Mr. Chair, that is it for our tour of the neighborhood. I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Archer?
Where is the new garage going to be in relation to the old garage? And which one of them in particular is the old garage we're looking at, please?
I'll describe verbally and use my pointer. It's the sort of a cream-colored single door that we're looking at here. The additional the additional addition being constructed at some alternate date. Actually, that's, you know what, let's go to the site plan. That might be a little more useful. But to capture, so primary dwelling to the left that I'm circling and proposed garage to the right. The proposed setback is to remain as it is today, same place. So the envelope of the existing garage would have fallen within the what is proposed and outlined in this square. The existing garage would be within this envelope.
Is the envelope bigger than the existing garage?
Through the chair to the member, the garage is proposing a larger footprint than the existing, yes.
My concern with that is the comment from Septic. The garage on the property is existing, so they think everything's fine. Well, the property is not existing, is it? The one that's there now is going to be torn down and there's going to be a bigger one put in? To the member, correct, the existing garage is to be torn down and be replaced with a new garage. And we'll just turn to the septic division comments in the report, page 4, top of the page. I'm just focusing in on the sentence. Through our evaluation, we did not note an issue with the placement or size of the garage. Through to the member, is the question that perhaps the septic division is suggesting the existing garage and not acknowledging or identifying that it's a proposed garage? Right, because the sentence previous says the garage on the property is existing. We do not note an issue with the placement of the garage. Well, that's not the garage we're dealing with, right?
I understand the comment, Mr. Chair, of the member. My dare I say, interpretation of this comment did not indicate to me that we were talking about the existing garage remaining in place. The supervisor of Part 8 sewage did have a copy of the application, the site plan, recognizing that it's a new garage to replace the existing, but I certainly wouldn't want to put words in her mouth if I'm wrong on that. And Mr. Chair, may I ask if it's appropriate just to have our chief building official weigh in on this so that I'm not speaking out of place with respect to our septic supervisor's comments. I appreciate the question, and I think we need that clarified. Thanks.
Oh, I think that's a very good idea. So, Ms. Murchison, you've heard the comments going on. Your response would be?
Through Mr. Chair, honestly, without speaking to Ann Elmhurst, I'm not going to be able to, without a shadow of a doubt, say that I know what she was thinking when she wrote this. I would be doing the same thing that Leah is doing, and that is to assume that the paperwork in front of her would have shown the footprint on the site plan of the proposed garage. It doesn't anywhere on that paperwork indicate the existing garage. So if her evaluation is based on the application paperwork, she would have been evaluating based on the proposed garage footprint. But if we need it clarified, we're gonna have to speak to her in person.
If I could add, Mr. Chair, to the CBO's comments, and thank you to the CBO for weighing in. It would not be uncommon for us to perhaps capture this in a condition of approval, that the septic evaluation be confirmed to have included the sizing as it relates to, and location. We don't want to encroach on the tiles or the septic field needed for the sewage system. If we include that as a
Ms.
condition of
Archer?
approval.
Yeah, again, I think that's an excellent idea, so. yeah. Further questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? All right. That not being the case, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Looks like an easy day on that one. Mr. Strangway?
Recommended as printed.
All right, do I have a seconder? Oh, I have a question first.
Thought we just going to put a condition in, I'm sorry about the septic.
All right, do I have a seconder for the motion? Ms. Robinson? All right, Ms. Archer? Mr. Strangway?
Yes, please, that we put a condition in that the septic does understand that it's a new garage, it's not the old garage.
That's fine.
Okay. Robinson, you're okay with that?
Yes.
All right, good. Any further comments or questions with respect to the amended motion on the floor? All right. Yes, Ms. Richardson, I see a question.
As Ms. Archer proposed an amendment, do you not need a seconder on that?
No.
Is a friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Mr. Strangway was good enough to smile on that one. All right. Mr. Strangway, yea or nay?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Councillor Yo?
In favor?
All right. Ms. Archer? Ms. Richardson? And I'm in favor. That carries. The application is approved. Thank you, folks. All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2022-067, and this is 131 1/2 King Street West, former village of Omemee. Ms. Berry, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this next application is to facilitate construction of a detached accessory building, a garage, in the rear yard of the property, described as 131 1/2 King Street West, in the settlement area of Omemee. Okay, so nature of the application, reason it's necessary is to address lot coverage. Bit of a misnomer in title, actually. The Omemee zoning bylaw refers to this provision as lot coverage. It's actually more like building coverage, and I'll get into that in just a moment. The coverage maximum 40%. What is proposed is 52.54%. All right. So let's advance our slides, and at this scale, I can see from where I'm sitting, not a whole lot. So the purpose of this, and perhaps in your packages is a wee bit better to see, is just to give you some idea of the low-density nature of the neighborhood, the shape and size of the parcels, and the fact that garages take on a variety of ground floor areas in the neighborhood. So the site plan itself indicating the location and size of the proposed garage. The existing home is about 119 square meters. It doesn't contain an attached garage, and there aren't any other accessory buildings present on the lot. The garage is intended for secure vehicle parking and storage of other items that can't otherwise be accommodated in the home. Some elevations here also in your report packages, And to give you an indication of the lot itself, here is the home, sans garage. And as we travel up the driveway, behind that blue gate, which is currently the extent of the secure area, the proposed location would be approximately covered by these fun jet skis that we see in the back here. Okay, almost in line with the neighbors to the west garage. All right. So we're in an urban land use designation which permits the residential use, also permitted in the R1 zone. Surrounding lots, as I indicated, do appear to me to contain a variety of garage shapes and sizes. The fact that the garage is being placed at the rear of the property, and I'll note in accordance and in fact exceeding the rear and side yard setbacks, provides for some separation from the home, leaving some open space in the rear yard, but also being able to maintain front yard space. The home is set back from the road allowance, and it too exceeds the front yard setback. Now, the height that is proposed for the garage is less than that, than the primary dwelling. So it's sort of maintaining its ability to be subordinate in its physical stature, notwithstanding the larger footprint, not asking for an increase in height in this case. I alluded to this at the intro. For comparative purposes, I wanted to share with the committee that similar urban zoning bylaws regulate accessory coverage of the lot as opposed to the ground floor area of the dwelling. That's the case in the Omemee zoning bylaw. So following this principle, if we're just to look at the size of the garage in relation to the lot, we're actually at 6.7%, and you'll be quite familiar with the coverage maximum that we tend to see in many zoning bylaws in sort of the 10% range, the 8 to 10% range. So the garage itself, when looking at its size in relation to the property, is certainly in keeping with within reason, and not unlike numerous garages in the area. So on this basis, at least from a policy perspective, we see merit in approving the increased coverage for the garage at this site. Though we didn't receive any concerns or objections from our commenting partners, we did receive one letter, a written submission from the next door neighbor. We're looking at Miss Debbie Coulter's property on the slide, actually up on the screen at the moment, at 133 King Street West. Now, there was a concern raised by Ms. Coulter about excess watershed, meaning water being drained potentially onto her property as a result of the garage. She notes in her comments that she's experienced drainage issues, in her opinion, because of there not being a swale built between the properties, that is the reason for the flooding. She notes that there has been some damage to her house foundation as a result. Now, grading and drainage certainly are matters that are covered off and were covered off in the construction of the home. Garages, and certainly ones that aren't being proposed in a reduced side yard, for example, or as a result of increased height, both being the case here, meaning neither side yard reduction nor increase in height, would not trigger the need for a separate drainage and grading plan. We think that the siting of the garage and its ability to not just uphold but exceed the minimum side yard, together with the fact that the height and the design of the roof, let's take a look at that, would not be expected to contribute to any drainage concerns on this property or on an adjacent property. So we would conclude our thoughts, Mr. Chair, on that note, and welcome your questions, should you have any.
And committee, do we have any questions? All right. Oh, Mrs. Richardson, go ahead.
Through you, The Miss Debbie Coulter does have some legitimate concerns. Is there anything we can do to assist her in addressing this?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, we're certainly aware that when issuing building permits, when they relate to minor variances, the building division is astutely aware of the conditions that are imposed on the variance and must guarantee that they are met and satisfied before a building permit can be issued. Perhaps the committee would entertain a condition where all water that is shed from the immediate location of the proposed garage be directed away from the abutting lot. Would be both a flag and a notification to the building division, but more importantly to the owner themselves. We know that matters like this do come up between property owners and are limited in the extent that the municipality can sort of assist in this regard. It is, should there be a drainage issue, really a civil matter between both parties.
I would suggest, if we're going to amend the motion for that, and we're not at the motion yet, but it be to advise the building department that we have concerns with respect to the drainage issue, then perhaps they could consider it rather than us saying we want this directed or that directed. I don't think that's part of our mandate, but the amendment would read that the building division be advised that the committee would, or just that the building committee be advised that the committee is concerned with respect to water drainage, and further advise or request that the building division look at that during the permit process. All right, anything further from the planner? All right, Councillor Yeo, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Drainage isn't a new issue in the city of Kawartha Lakes, and it's an ongoing issue. And I know we're acting on good intentions on advising the building department of it. It's actually written in the Building Code of Canada, you're not allowed to shed water from one lot to another. And so perhaps when we're advising the building department, we can advise the abutting landowners that they can work in conjunction with the proponent and help solve the problem in many areas of the city by combining their forces and putting swales on the property lines to divert water. Because it's an ongoing complaint. So if we're going to go one step, there's so many more steps we can take. So I don't know the solution at this point. I could support the suggestion to acknowledge the building department on it, but there, at some point it's got to come to the fact that it's an ongoing problem with neighbors, and it's probably the number one issue in the city as far as neighbors go with water. And so we're going to have to find some common ground at some point. That's more of a statement, I guess, than a solution. But I will support the amendment or the condition. Thank you.
You will or you won't?
I will. Yes.
Yeah, because, and I agree with what you said. It's just that I think the only thing we're trying to do here is red flag for the building department that during the process that's be looked at. So yeah, and when we get there, we'll get the wording straightened out. So. Is there anything further from the, yes?
Follow up to the discussion that's taking place. Am I correct that flooding in some of these areas of Omemee is an ongoing problem? It's just not unique to this property?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, anecdotally, I have heard, yes, very similar commentary that is a case not limited to Omemee, but occurs in Omemee as well.
Thank you.
I think we might stay away from that on this motion just because it's opened a can of worms. So, yeah, we'll direct our amendment to this application motion. Okay. Anything further from committee members to the planner? Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
I'm here.
Oh.
Um, as far as the water,
Now, just a minute, sir. I'd like your name first.
Daniel McCush.
All right, go ahead, sir.
As far as the water, most of the water that is coming into our backyards. And
Oh, no, wait,
both
hang on.
neighbors on either side of me.
You're not the applicant, then. You're wishing to either support or oppose this. Am I correct?
No, I am the applicant.
Okay, well, so he's talking about, all right. Go ahead. I got confused there with that. You're on, sir.
I was just talking about the water that's coming in. The problem, I talk to Debbie all the time. Most of the water is coming from the houses behind us during the spring melt. It's not that it's coming from my property to hers. It's coming from the properties behind us. And the neighbor on the other side, 131, also has worse issues with water. That's all. I just wanted to, that it's not my property draining onto hers. It's
Yeah,
the properties behind us.
I'm just reading Ms. Coulter's documentation here, and she's indicated that she believes it is coming from that property, so we'll go with that, sir. Anything further that you wish to say with respect to the application?
No.
Thank you. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? No. Ms. Richardson, I'm going to ask you to put the motion together with your amendment, please.
I am hoping that Charlotte has the amendment as you verbalized it, because I certainly didn't write it down.
I think as simple as this for the amendment, that the building division be advised of the application and the concerns related to water drainage issues. And then us going into a bunch of that. All right, so as printed with the amendment, with the added amendment. All right. Do I have a seconder for that, Ms. Archer? All right. Any further comments or questions? All right. Ms. Richardson. Mrs. Archer. Councillor Yeo.
In favor?
Ms. Robinson.
In favor.
Mr. Strangway.
In favor.
And I'm in favor. Thank you very much for that, folks. All right. Your application is approved, sir, with the amendment.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-068, and this is 17 King Street East, former village of Bobcaygeon. Ms. Berry, you're a busy lady. Go ahead.
All right, it keeps me young, Mr. Chair. So the next application is located at 17 King Street East in Bobcaygeon, and the effect of this application would be to facilitate a seasonal, primarily summer, but with the gorgeous weather we have currently extending through beyond summer season, possibly the fall and beyond. Anyway, outdoor patio area. The patio itself would not, and this relief is not governed by seasonality, meaning parking relief is parking relief. This piece is just to characterize how the owners have been approaching the use of the patio area. So, purpose of the application, what we are looking for here is a reduction in parking requirements. This reduction in parking requirement would effectively permit the patio area to remain in place. And yes, I do say remain in place because it is currently there. Now, a little bit of parking arithmetic gymnastics needed on this one because it's got a bit of a history, and I'll try to summarize for you and give you the highlights. Here we go. 1, existing commercial use. We are at the Just for the Halibut restaurant in Bobcaygeon. There is a long line of commercial enterprises, endeavors that have taken place at this very property over time. The applicant, Mr. Tom DeBoer, has been good enough to provide us with that history. So legacy commercial uses, in fact, helped this property qualify for what is an existing deficiency. Based on the current restaurant use, the parking already is deficient by about 9 spots. Now, secondly, the city passed a temporary use bylaw in 2021. This was in response to the Emergency Act measures that were done through the pandemic. This was a temporary use bylaw that waived parking requirements for patios. Although passed in 2021, it extended through 2022 and is to lapse January 1st of 2023. So currently, the patio does not require any additional parking than the already existing parking that is there. Should this temporary use bylaw not be extended, and should it be allowed to lapse as it currently is intended to do, this minor variance is a more permanent solution to waive the 12 parking spaces that are otherwise needed. So if looking at the patio in isolation, it would require 12 additional parking spaces. Currently on the property, there are only 18. And so the effect of this application would be to exempt the requirement for 12 additional parking spaces. That's it. All right. We're going to take a look on the ground at this parking lot in just a moment, but this slide here gives us an idea of the location of the restaurant itself. There are a few structures in the back, including a shed. And now we can see the site plan that lays out where each individual parking space is and the extent of the patio behind the existing restaurant. And if you're not familiar with the restaurant, it is situated beside the beer store on one side, and the driveway is what provides access from King Street into the rear of the property. And as we go down the driveway to the right of the building, photo on the right, we end up here, now at the back of the property, looking at the parking spaces behind, as well as giving us some insight into what the existing patio looks like. For context, a bit of history here, a variance was approved for the site in 2019, just a couple of years ago. At that time, it was to support a different proposal. The proposal at that time, some of you may even recall, was threefold. It would have facilitated a patio in the front of the restaurant, in the rear of the restaurant, and conversion of the lower level of the restaurant into a banquet or event facility. Space for that. So it's required exemption or relief from the parking requirement at that time, which was granted. Since that time, the sunset clause has taken place. That former minor variance has expired. Based on the changing demands of the community and the market itself and the interests of the owners, they have changed their proposal and are no longer interested in converting that downstairs area as at one point they were, or having patio space in the front, but instead just focusing on the patio space at the back of the building. There are 18 spaces that are on the site, and as you can see, it's completely maxed out. There is no other area that could be used or converted for more parking. So again, the lot fabric itself, the siting of the existing building and storage shed have really resulted in this that we're seeing, maxing out on available parking space. The urban land use designation and the C1 zone in Bobcaygeon both allow for the continuation of the restaurant use, the patio as well, permitted in the land use designation in the zone. A parking brief was prepared by the applicant this summer to supplement the request for relief, or ultimately the exemption from the 12 parking spaces that would be needed to accommodate the patio after January 1st, 2023. The brief itself outlines a series of parking alternatives. These include the continued use of on-site parking in the lot that you see on the slide in front of you, making use of the on-street parking that's available, King Street, both sides of Bolton and William Streets nearby, as well as using a nearby municipal parking lot, and that is accessible from Bolton Street. Patron activity during the summer season indicates an increase of boaters and pedestrian activity, ultimately this being non-vehicular. In some ways, the potential impact has already been tested with respect to the fact that the existing patio is already in use, and the owners have been able to sort of monitor and track and hear complaints, of which I understand there were none, in terms of the unavailability of parking. They had not come across any issues where patrons were needing to get turned away because of insufficient parking available in the parking lot. They were making use of, if needed, other parking alternatives. Given their market research, the trends that they have identified, the fact that this business has been in place for many, many years. I do also support the suggested alternatives outlined in the parking brief, and on that basis, am able to support the request for the exemption from the 12 spaces, recognizing the 18 that are there to facilitate this patio to continue next year. No issues raised by any of our commenting agencies, and no members of the public commented on this file, Mr. Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Are there any questions to the planner? Ms. Archer, go ahead.
From the look of that, is the cabin, shed, whatever, is it taking up a parking space?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, the applicant may be able to tell us whether there was a parking space there in the past. Could it be replaced to accommodate an additional parking space if that structure wasn't needed to be there? Perhaps. But to answer your question, to me, there is no indication that it was a parking space in the past.
Just looking on Appendix C, and I was trying to count them all. It looks like counting all of those, there's the 18 you're referring to, and that looks like it's smack dab in the middle of the ones on the right side, but I'm not sure.
What we understand is that it wouldn't, there weren't 19 before this structure was there to accommodate that, I'm going to just say infrastructure used to support the use, that it hadn't taken away one of the existing 18 spaces. Recognized today, recognized in 2019 and before then.
Perhaps we could follow it up with the consultant just to see what he has to say. Anything further of the planner?
Through you, I thought when this application was before, not this one, but the one previous, that they were making arrangements with their neighbor for parking on the abutting lot. Is that true?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, we'll defer to the applicant to address that. I'm not aware of if should that have been a detail through the previous arrangement, with my apologies.
I recall something about that as well, so.
Further, my memory is foggy on this application now, but at the time, did they not also request a patio and we denied it?
I believe a patio was discussed. Whether or not we denied it, I'm not familiar with that right now. Again, maybe that's something we can follow up with the consultant and just see what. Good questions. Anything further with respect to questions to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
I'm here, yeah.
Okay. Your name is? Okay.
Hi, I'm Julia Kirby.
And Mr. DeBoer, you're working on behalf of the applicant?
That is correct.
Right. All right. let's deal with, we had a couple of questions there. I'm sure you heard what they had to do with. Mrs. Archer, perhaps you could ask yours with respect to that building.
I just wanted confirmation, please, that the storage shed on the side, on the screen in front of us is not taking up one of the 19 parking spots that they say they have already.
Excuse me,
Okay.
sorry, could I just clarify before the applicant speaks? Mr. Chair, through you to the member, I believe the application identifies 18, not 19 parking spaces.
Do either one of you wish to respond to that question from committee member?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on this if that's all right, Julia.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Number one, Ms. Barry is correct. There's 18 proposed parking spaces. The one parking space in question that is occupied by a wood structure is actually housing the propane tank for the structure known as the restaurant itself. The only reason it's in a wood structure is just to avoid either A, people hitting it, and B, the aesthetics thereof. That propane tank has been there for a very, very long time because it's always been the heat source for that structure. So it does not occupy a parking spot, nor has that place been utilized in any calculation thus far. Number two, the patio was not denied. The application was approved in its entirety last time, both the front and rear patio alongside of the banquet hall. That minor variance, because of the extensiveness of the application, actually had a greater reduction in parking requirements or lack thereof. In this case, because we've removed the banquet hall and the front patio and have increased the size of the rear patio, the parking relief is actually less than the previously approved. Number two, the question with regards to the parking on the adjacent property, you're 100% correct. There was an easement created. The easement was approved and is currently registered on title and will be there in perpetuity. So therefore, it will not have any consequence on any further reduction on the on-site parking at this time. So hopefully that answers all of those questions. If there's more, please feel free.
Mr. Richardson certainly answered my question, so yeah. All right. Is there anything further you wish to say with respect to the application, either one of you?
No, I'm good.
Are there any further questions of the applicant? My hearing voices, I'm not sure. Yeah, all right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Why am I hearing other voices? Oh, they're gone now, so, all right. Pardon? Yeah. Woo. Maybe I'm going a little woozy here. All right. Committee, where are we? Mr. Strangway?
As indicated by the staff, I move it be approved.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Yeo? All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? Oh, no, wrong again. All right. Mr. Strangway, go ahead. Yay or nay?
In favor?
Councillor Yeo?
In favor?
All right. Ms. Robinson?
In favor.
Ms. Archer? Ms. Richardson? And I'm in favor. All right. Get caught every so often on that. Your application has been approved.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, yeah. All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2022-070, and this is 57 Potts Shore Road, Geographic Township of Fenland. And again, Ms. Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now at, 57 Potts Shore Road in Fenland Township. The purpose and effect in this application is to facilitate the construction of a boathouse. To do that, 4 areas of relief are being sought from the zoning bylaw: overall site coverage, as well as, and by extension, accessory structure coverage. So we're looking at coverage two ways. Overall lot coverage is permitted to be no greater than 30%, and the application results in 31%. Accessory structure additionally is 1 percentile difference. Lot coverage maximum is 8, proposed is 9%. The separation distance between the boathouse and the main dwelling, bylaw requires there be at least 1.2 meters in between those structures, and the proposal here is that they be attached. Effectively, that would be a 0 meter setback. And finally, taking a look at the definition of accessory building, it is characterized as being a detached structure, and in this case, the structure would be attached to the dwelling. All right. So we'll take a look at the site plan for the property itself. The dwelling exceeds the front yard setback to accommodate the septic system in the front yard. So effectively, this is already sort of constraining the area that is available in the backyard. An elevated, unenclosed deck wraps around the entire rear length of the dwelling. Given the siting of the existing building and structures, the location of the boathouse, in our opinion, is an efficient use of the limited rear yard space and an effective adaptive reuse of underutilized space under the existing deck. A crawl space exists under the dwelling now. The boathouse abuts the dwelling but will not be connected or accessible to the dwelling in any way. No kitchen or sanitary conveniences proposed, strictly a boathouse. Marine rails are also proposed that would be used for watercraft to access the water. I do distinguish the use of the boathouse as not having those sorts of conveniences, sanitary, kitchen, because by no means, although attached to the dwelling, would this structure be considered a residential addition. The boathouse is permitted in the waterfront designation in the official plan, also permitted in the LSR zone. The size of the boathouse is simply to ensure it's the correct depth for boat storage while staying compliant with other yard setbacks that are required. Although the coverage is being increased, the ground floor area of the boathouse is proposed at about 107 square meters. So this itself falls well under the maximum permitted, which is 225. Attaching the boathouse to the dwelling maintains the seamless nature of the wraparound deck. We'll see that in just a moment. It doesn't constitute a residential addition, as I've outlined. The setback in the Fenland Township bylaw and in many others is in place so that should adjacent buildings not be structurally attached, that they be at least 1.2 meters apart to ensure necessary separation distance with respect to fire safety. We have no concerns in this regard. This is a perspective prepared by the applicant, RWH Construction, that identifies sort of the overall look and feel of what is being proposed. We'll take a look at what we see on site, the home from Pot Shore Road, with that extensive front yard. We are now walking in between the two neighboring homes, several stair walk up to the deck, which continues around. As I said, wrap around the entire rear length of the home. And you have some idea there from the lattice work of the closing in just unused area. But this, of course, keeps out debris and some wildlife. The idea here is to reuse the space that is sort of in the foreground of this photo and convert it into boathouse space, which if we take a look at actually the neighboring property is exactly an indication of what is proposed at number 57 Pot Shore. And Mr. Chair, that is all for our brief photo tour. We did not receive any concerns or objections from any of the commenting agencies. We did receive, after the staff report was written, comments from the Conservation Authority identifying that permit is required. This is an area that's regulated by the Conservation Authority. And with the inclusion of the marine rails, would also require a permit from Parks Canada, both of which are natural extensions of the building permit process, and as such wouldn't require separate conditions be included. Mr. Chair, thank you. For that, we recommend approval of this application.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Questions of the planners? Mr. Strangway?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. Is there any concern or indication that the deck on top of the boathouse would be a concern if a person was to just simply want to build a deck that close to the waterfront? Would it be approved? Just a question.
Mr. Chair, through you, thanks for the question to the member. I appreciate that. We do see the use of upper space on boathouses. The zoning bylaws don't typically prohibit the upper levels of the boathouses, which don't necessarily have to be at the water's edge. We see them set back at times from the water's edge, although they also can be at the water's edge. And sometimes encroaching into the water, as it were. So in terms of height, that would be by 1 or 2 degrees of separation, an indication to staff, to the public, of what the upper area of a boathouse may or may not be used for, although not explicitly suggested that it cannot be used for any kind of extension or recreational purpose. I will add to that end that the height is not a concern in this case. Meaning the application isn't requesting an increased height, and nor is one needed to facilitate the use or the continued use of the deck space where it is now.
Follow?
Yeah, just to follow up, so just I'm clear, when this application comes forward, do they have to, you'd mentioned the Marine Railroad and approval from Trent Severn Parks Canada. Does the boathouse itself actually have to have an approval from Parks Canada?
Mr. Chair, through you, to the member, my understanding is no, it doesn't. It is just limited to any structures that are placed in the water, but not the boathouse itself. That is governed by our very own CBO here at the municipality.
Thank you very much.
Anything further of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Your name, sir? Can't hear you, sir.
Ryan Hayter.
Yeah, it's all about buttons, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just clicking stuff.
Yeah, your name, sir, is?
Ryan Hayter.
Go ahead, sir.
I'd just like to thank the committee for hearing this, and also thank Ms. Berry and Ms. Peck for their tireless work on this application and all the other ones. And if there's any questions from anybody on the committee, I'm happy to answer.
We do appreciate your comments. Thank you for that. And are there any questions of the applicant? Mr. Strangway?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for being here today. I know you've done a lot of work around the shorelines and so on. Just to follow up to the question to Ms. Berry, the actual approval for the boathouse, so you don't have to apply to Parks Canada for that?
No, sir. No. Parks Canada only is required for anything that is in the lake bed. Docks, marine railways, if we were to build a boathouse out into the water, or if you're doing any shoreline work in the water, Parks Canada needs a permit, but not for the actual boathouse.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Any further questions of the applicant? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? All right, being none. Committee. Mr. Strangway?
As approved, or as recommended by staff.
Do I have a seconder? Okay, Ms. Richardson. All right, any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All right. Mr. Conway,
Favor?
Ms. Richardson,
In favor?
Ms. Archer, Ms. Robinson,
In favor.
Councillor Yo,
In favor.
and I'm in favor. That motion carries. Your application is approved, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Right along here. All right, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-071, and this is number 4 Greenwood Road, Geographic Township of Laxton. Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So switching gears a little bit here, we are now looking at an application to enlarge a legal non-conforming use. Currently on the property is a single detached dwelling built around 1958. This residential use predates the Laxton zoning bylaw, United Townships, LDL, Laxton, Digby, Longford, and that bylaw was adopted in 1983. It zones the property open space. Section 7 of the bylaw would not otherwise permit new residential uses. So this legal non-conforming use stands, and the application would ultimately allow for a fairly modest addition of about 25.5 square meters of residential space added on to the existing home. And take a look at the photo of the home here in just a moment. The owner has provided documentation to support their position that the existing dwelling was constructed in 1958. Of course, we know that predates the bylaw. We have tax certificates in this regard, as well as an affidavit prepared that goes through a chronology of uses from previous owners and provides that bit of history to us. The existing residential use has continued uninterrupted to present day. All right, outlined in red on this site plan indicates the area of the proposed addition. The home itself is just over 71 square meters. It contains 1 washroom, 2 small bedrooms, and no laundry area. The proposed addition is intended to provide a new laundry area and to increase the size of the bedrooms. The continuation of this residential use and the addition would not preclude the lot from being used for open space uses in the future, should that be the direction that the owners or a future owner might elect to go. Surrounding residential lots are a variety of zones. We see both open space zones with residential uses, and we see limited service residential zones also with residential uses along Greenwood Road. The neighborhood itself has a shoreline residential character. This addition results in a built form that is, in my opinion, compatible with other residential lots and is in keeping with if we were to align the built form to a comparable zone. For example, the LSR aligns quite suitably with the LSR zone provisions. In my opinion, no impact on surrounding property owners. These proposed addition, neither on property owners nor environmental features or on the function of the municipal right-of-way. With respect to access, drainage, or streetscaping and maintenance. We received no concerns, Mr. Chair, from the circulated agencies or from the public. The Conservation Authority indicated after the staff report was written that no permit is required for this proposed addition, and here we see an elevation of what is proposed, what is existing, and to give you an idea of what is happening on site, we have a row of cedars along the front lot line and quite a deeply set of structures towards the lake on approach from the road. On the left is what we would say is the front of the home. There is a small garage even closer to the road than the home, still well exceeding any kind of setback requirements from the road. And on the right is an image of the rear of the home. This image is intended to demonstrate the use abutting the lot. It's a residential use. Again, keeping within reasonable setbacks. We anticipate no impact on the continued enjoyment of either property. Mr. Chair, we recommend approval of this application under section 45(2) of the application. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions of the planner? All right. The only question I have, if I may, Ms. Berry, on page 3 of 7, is that a relatively new encroachment agreement, or is it dated? Does it go back a ways? Do you know?
Mr. Chair, it isn't new. It does go back a ways, and with your indulgence, we can check the file. It was included to supplement the application, which we were able to vet through the Realty Services Department at the city. So if it pleases you, Mr. Chair, I'll take a look at the year that that agreement came into effect.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just curious because I remember applications in the past where there was encroachments and we didn't bother doing anything. So I was just curious as to, because we're talking about this place, legal non-conforming, it's been around for a while. So, but there is an established encroachment agreement in place then, so, all right.
Yes.
Anything further to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hello,
I hear a voice.
can you hear me?
All right, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I just want to correct that picture is not a parking, is just a small shed. It's not a parking, the one that she was, yeah, this left side, the brown area is not a parking, it's just a small shed that I'm keeping the equipment there.
Anything further you wish to say, ma'am?
No, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? All right. Being none, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application? Name, sir?
Hello, this is Farid. I am the designer on behalf of the homeowner. For us, our proposal was to add a separate laundry, a bigger laundry, and make it a comfortable bedroom for the owner to use at a different time. And we followed all the setback from the side. It was encouragement in the lot, which was included in our design. And everything was reviewed by Kawarta, and Kawarta Lake had no issue with the environmental effect from that aspect. And now we would like to have your opinion. Is it allowing us to do this construction, this development, which doesn't have any affection to the site or neighbors? And in our opinion, there is not no harm to the access to the sea as previously. We only extended from rear side, and it has a safe distance from the existing septic.
All right,
That was
thank
a summary
you.
of the project.
Can we get, I forgot to ask you your name, sir. Could you give us your name, please?
My name is Farid, just spelling Farid, but you can pronounce whatever you can. I don't mind. Don't worry.
All right. Anything further you wish to add, either one of you?
Only my last sentence, it was one story. We are remaining as it is one story, but we are removing the roof to make it a new roof in a better way to falling snow down and contribute the load. That was the reason we are changing the existing roof, and the new portion also has a new roof. We are making all with the wooden trusses, and in one part from interior will be exposed wooden truss to have a traditional, like traditional old English fashion from inside.
All right, thank you for that, sir. And just hang a minute. Are there any questions of the speaker? All right, thank you both for taking the time. We do appreciate that. I'll go again. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application. All right. Committee. Councillor Yo, Ms. Archer, second. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Councillor Yo, yea or nay?
In favor?
Ms. Archer? All right. Ms. Robinson?
In favor.
Ms. Richardson?
In favor.
Mr. Strangway?
In favor.
And I'm in favor. Your application is approved.
Thank you so much.
Yep,
Sir,
thank you.
thank you very much. It was my first experience with your city. Looking forward to work with you. You will do all your requirement by law and we'll send a full submission. Have a good day to all, including client.
Thank you.
Good day. Bye. You're welcome. Bye.
All right, I call the meeting back to order. And we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-072. And this is 195 Campbell Beach Road, Geographic Township of Carden. Ms. Berry, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The application at 195 Campbell Beach Road would facilitate a residential addition, is what has been applied for, perhaps better characterized as a residential expansion, I'll say. The house is in quite a state of disrepair. Large holes exist in the windows. It's certainly not currently occupied. So we'll see on the site plan and some of the photos that come, that what the application would facilitate is essentially the reconstruction of this home. Okay, and to do that, two areas of relief from the zoning bylaw. One, to address the minimum water setback reduction, and two, the minimum side yard setback reduction. So currently, there is a non-compliant setback of 7.2 meters for the dwelling. The requirement in the bylaw is 20, so clearly under this number. The proposal is that this 7.2 meters remain unchanged. The addition of a deck on the lakeside of the home, although not closer to the water than what is existing, would be within the 20-meter setback. And so the deck is proposed at 11.3 meters, not 20. With respect to the side yard setback, the bylaw requires 3 meters on one side and 2.2 meters on the other. As a result of the the new deck construction, the setbacks would result as 2.5 on one side and 0.73 meters on the other. The lot itself is on the southwest shore of Lake Dalrymple. That's at the very end of Campbell Beach Road, heavily, and if I may say beautifully, wooded this time of year. It'll pop off the screen here in just a moment. The existing single-story detached home dates back to about 1967, just under 90 square meters. Certainly in need of substantial repairs in my non-construction and engineering opinion, just by seeing what is there. The home predates the bylaw. The bylaw was adopted in 1979. The home is within the current water setback. There's an existing shed and privy within the west side yard setback. Those will be demolished to accommodate the new construction. So the proposal is to add about 112.8 square meters. This would increase the functionality and living space. An additional, just shy of 50 square meters of attic space is also proposed, and that would be used for additional storage. An attached deck with stairs is proposed on the north or waterside, lakeside of the home, and that would include a sunken pool with exterior decking. The proposed deck and stairs provide about 118 square meters of outdoor living space. So this residential use is permitted in the waterfront designation in the official plan. The house itself, although larger than the existing dwelling footprint, still is within a low-density housing type, maintains a low building profile, which is one of the goals of the waterfront designation, and this is to blend with the natural features and the natural surroundings, to remain below the height of the tree canopy, which this will. The reuse of the existing building envelope also limits the disturbance to the existing vegetation and natural features on site, which are plentiful. The residential use is permitted also in the RR2 zone. The existing setbacks hold non-compliances. In part, they're a result of the angled shoreline, part of which we can see on the site plan on the slide in front of us. The unenclosed deck that's proposed minimizes hazard risks. It improves the existing noncompliance, meaning it is set farther back from the shoreline. Though scheduled for demolition, the existing shed and privy have historically held a compatibility. They're long-standing. These side yard encroachments that they have resulted in or created, those encroachments of at least 2 feet would still be in place by the new deck. Substantial vegetation buffers this proposed outdoor living space on the narrow side, the reduction to 0.73 meters from the adjacent neighbor to the west. And after we take a look at a number of elevations that you'll find in your reports, the lot is, as I had identified, at the end of Campbell Beach Road, very heavily wooded, and the house is set quite far back from the road itself. These images give us an indication of the rear yard space, the space between the existing corner that has the furthest encroachment into the water setback. And perhaps you can see just to the extreme right of the second photo where the water is quite marshy. So there's actually some water bed that exists closer inland than the water that I'm not able to point to with the laser pointer. But anyway, the water does get more marshy as we come inland towards the home. Okay, and so the purpose of the arrows, because of the extent of vegetation and perhaps the lighting at this time of day, are intended to just indicate where the closest neighboring home is through the trees. And this is the shed that already encroaches into the side yard. So to give us some idea of the existing vegetation in place that would help buffer the new deck from the neighboring property. Now, Mr. Chair, I have added as a condition of approval to support the application and our recommendation that it be approved, comments from our supervisor of Part 8 Septic. Full evaluation has not yet been conducted on the proposal, so we are suggesting that a condition be placed if this committee approves the minor variance, that a septic review be conducted prior to the issuance of a building permit. I will also note that after the report was written, we received comments from the Conservation Authority, KRCA, that no permit is required. This is outside of the regulated area of the Conservation Authority, but given proximity of potential flooding hazards, the fish habitat associated with the lake, the significant woodlands, and the provincially significant wetland and Carden Plain that are in proximity to the property, that the KRCA recommends that the redevelopment stay within the envelope shown on the detailed sketches and plans included with this report, so as not to encroach on the key natural heritage features on surrounding properties. We have no reason to think that the proposal would be changed to demonstrate that the proposed reconstruction would be anywhere outside of the building envelope as proposed, and these comments were circulated to the applicant for their awareness. All right, Mr. Chair, I will leave things there with our recommendation for approval.
And thank you for that. Are there any questions of the planner? All right. Being none. Actually, is the chief building official still with us? All right. I have a question for you, and it's more of a general question, I guess, but I'm seeing here, and I realize that as a result of the construction, they're going to have to remove this privy and this shed. And that's, we in the past used to add conditions when it was mentioned within the report from staff that a shed should be removed or whatever should be removed. We stopped putting those on because we were told that it was part of the building permit process. So I guess my question to you is this: if we have an application, there's 2 or 3 conditions, but none of those conditions relate to the fact that a shed should be removed or something else should be removed, do you, because all you've got before you are the conditions that have been identified, do you read through the reports to see if there is a question such as a shed has to be removed? Or I'm saying that because what happens if, as a result of this construction, they find that they don't have to remove one or perhaps both of these? Where's the building division with that, if in fact it's not identified as a condition?
Through the chair, I'm not sure if that is the reason behind why you're not putting conditions regarding shed removal anymore. What I recall from that topic is that if we put it in as a condition, then we can't issue our building permit until that shed is gone. What you used to put in was a condition that they take out a demolition permit to take out the shed. And the sheds were of a size that didn't require a building permit. So that's one of the things we've stopped putting in, is that clarification on, that they all needed a demolition permit so that we could track them through the building department, because we can't, through our legislation, require a demolition permit for a structure that isn't required to get one under the Building Code Act. So, and then the second part to that is, if it's tying somebody with a condition that says you can't obtain your permit until you've complied with all the conditions, and you put a condition in that says when construction is completed, you have to remove the shed, you're kind of putting people in a loop that we can't get out of. So I think it's not that we don't want the conditions, it's that we want to make sure that they're worded in such a way that we don't, put the staff in a position where they can't issue a permit, or the customer in a position where they can't get a permit. So yeah, with respect to a shed, if it's under 15 square meters, it's not governed by the Building Code Act. So it's not relevant to tag it to my department. It's a bylaw enforcement issue.
So in order not to convolute the issue, then I guess generally speaking, we would today say that it's on an honor system then? Would I be correct in saying that?
Through the chair, and maybe to Ms. Barry, that she might have to weigh in on how you'd want to address it. But as far as if it's placed as a condition that it has to be removed prior to the variance becoming final and binding, and the variance becomes final and binding when you get your first building inspection, that's the loop I'm talking about. You get your customer trapped where I can't issue a permit until the shed is removed. The shed may need to be staying there until they're done their construction to move the objects into this new building. And one of us has to break the rules. So it's usually the building department that has to bend and say, okay, I'll give you your permit, even though you legally don't have a final and binding minor variance. So we prefer that we make conditions that are satisfiable prior to issuance, so that we're not putting the building division staff in a position where they shouldn't be issuing that permit yet without all of those pieces done. So as long as the client is agreeable to removing their shed ahead of getting their building permit, there's no problem with those being in as a condition, except that it's not something the building department can enforce. That's municipal law enforcement under the zoning bylaw to enforce too many structures or non-compliant setbacks, things like that. So the building division staff really can't force that shed to disappear because it doesn't fall within our purview.
All right. Thank you. Now, I think I saw a couple of hands. Ms. Robinson, did I see?
Yes, I was just going to ask, could we say that it has to get removed within 6 months of issuance of the building permit?
Ms. Murchison?
Through the chair, again, you're back to who polices that. Because if it doesn't require a building permit under the Building Code Act, it's not my department's thing to police. It's a zoning infraction. It's an infraction against your minor variance decision. So someone would have to track it through the planning division to make sure that it was removed. And if it wasn't, then what that literally does is make your minor variance no longer binding. And then what do we do as a municipality? Do we revoke their building permit partway through construction to say you're no longer allowed permission to build what you've asked for because you didn't remove that shed? It's a tricky topic to try and tag to our minor variances. I get where we're going with it, but it is a tricky object to deal with. It's probably best dealt with as a separate entity that somehow we tag it to our municipal law enforcement as a case that they have to follow up and make sure it's gone because it's a non-compliant shed that's been flagged.
Because we see these, and I don't wish to belabor the point, but we see, these are very common, these comments within these reports about, a shed should be removed, or this should be removed, or that should be removed. I don't consider it a miscellaneous item. If it's in the report, it's a significant issue as far as I'm concerned, but I do hear what you're saying, and Ms. Berry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just add, this shed may not last the winter, number one. Number two, in this case, and I certainly appreciate the discussion as it relates generally to any number of applications. In this case, it's one where it will have to be removed to accommodate the new construction. So that would be incumbent on the owners to get their building permit in accordance with the plans they've submitted. They will have to demolish the shed to do that. Similarly with the privy, my understanding is that through the evaluation of the septic permit, sewage system permit, one can't have both the privy and whether it's a traditional class 4 or an advanced treatment system, both can't stay. So to get the new one in, the privy needs to go. So in this particular case, there are belt and suspenders already in place.
I addressed that right at the beginning. I understand that they probably do have to go, but there are those, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that it would be this applicant, but there are those who would, well, maybe if we just move this a wee bit, we won't have to take this down or that down, and that happens. But anyway, is there anything further on that from anyone? Yes, Ms. Murchison, go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. So just a further comment on that, the other avenue you have as a committee, which is kind of not your preference, is that you can tell the people that it has to be removed before you'll make your decision. If it's really that concerning that you think the shed will never disappear, you can defer them for a month and tell them to get rid of their shed before they come back before the committee, I guess. But it's not something we want to do. So therefore, like I've mentioned, it ends up in this kind of limbo where we see this with not only sheds, we see this with people coming out for building permits to replace an existing dwelling, and they're not an overlapping footprint. They then make a decision partway through construction, well, maybe I'd like to keep it after all. So then some of them are back to see you to decide whether or not you can accept it as an oversized accessory building or in the wrong yard, like the one we had at the last meeting. Things like that come up. So I don't know if you'll ever solve this. It's just going to be an ongoing, thing we tackle.
No, and I thank you for that. And yeah, it's as I say, just one of those things that I'll leave it at that. Anything further? Ms. Archer?
I just have a quick question. I'm not sure to who I should be asking, but concession or conditions 2 and 3 both have 24-month timeframes. Well, condition 3 is 24 months for the septic, I believe, septic review. So if it comes third, if they don't get that till the 23rd month, they've only got 1 month to finish their building. Should there be a different time frame for those two?
Ms. Murchison, do you want to speak to that?
Through the chair, you have to also recognize your wording on the 24 months for building is always tagged to the first building inspection. So if they dawdle for 23 months, it means they have 1 month to get their footing inspection done. It doesn't mean complete their house. So usually customers aren't going to end up in putting themselves in that pickle. If they're not going to comply with the 24 months, it's usually across the board for all of their variance conditions, not just one of them.
Oh, good question. Thank you for that. All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? And your name, sir?
My name is Mike De Oliveira. I'm here representing 195 Campbell Beach Road, and I'm with Replacement Design.
All right, go ahead, sir.
911 Davenport Road. Yeah, I believe planning did a good job of going over all of our variances and explaining why we believe it would be minor overall in the sense of the neighborhood and the existing setbacks of the current dwelling. I don't really have anything else to point out. I think they made all the comments for us. Just like to reiterate that they're correct. The shed would have to be removed in order to accommodate the new additions. So open any questions you might have. I think they've explained it all quite well.
All right, thank you for taking the time. And are there any questions of the applicant? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? All right, where are we? Ms. Archer, as printed, do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson? All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All right. Ms. Archer? Ms. Richardson?
In favor?
Mr. Strangway?
In favor?
Ms. Robinson?
In favor.
Councillor Yeo?
In favor.
All right, and I'm in favor. All right, that motion carries, and the application is approved, sir.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2022-073, and this is 7 Charlotte Crescent, Geographic Township of Emily. Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application would facilitate the construction of an addition to the home, and specifically an attached garage with upper-level loft space. And we'll take a look at the floor plans here in a moment. The idea is that the loft space would flow seamlessly with the upper level of the home. One area of relief needed to facilitate this residential addition, and that is with respect to the minimum interior side yard. The requirement is at 3 meters. The addition proposes to extend what currently is a non-complying setback of about 1.8 meters, more specifically 5 foot 11 inches at the south corner, to actually an improvement increasing up to 1.82 meters, or about 6 feet, at the north corner of the addition. All right, so at 7 Charlotte Crescent in Emily Township. Give us an idea here of the neighborhood, low-density residential neighborhood. And the site itself, a little more clearly, demonstrates where the lot lines fall. This is based on the parcel identification number as opposed to the previous plan. Again, sorry, a bit of a scale difference here. And you've heard me say this on a number of occasions, often see a misalignment between the aerial mapping layer and the parcel fabric layer based on the assessment roll number, but the PIN number, a little better delineates or demarcates how close the existing home already is to the side property line. This home was built around 1985. It was constructed with an attached garage, but since then it's been converted to habitable space to accommodate the applicant's mom, who's moved in to help out with the children in the home. There are 2 existing sheds on the property. Also, just through this kind of construction and renovation period, a temporary shelter has also been placed in the driveway in front of the home, as well as a shipping container. That is a rental that will be removed, is not intended for permanent storage. And even with all of this, this growing family still needs more storage, hence the addition and the garage space. The garage itself would provide a ground floor workshop for the owner, and as well additional storage. The loft space would be an extension of the home and would be habitable. The design choices that have been made, we'll take a look at some of the elevations here, complement the existing dwelling. They remain sensitive to the abutting residential use, with limited new window treatments on the east wall. I will note there are already windows on the east wall, and just a limited number of new windows on the upper level proposed. The siting of the addition is certainly appropriate given the location of the driveway and the interior floor layout of the home. The reduced setback accommodates alignment of the addition with the existing east wall. In other words, it would be a flush wall. We wouldn't see any kind of a jut in to be respectful of the side yard setback requirement. The residential use is permitted in the waterfront designation. The residential use also permitted in the RR3 zone. The existing east side wall, it's not precisely parallel with the east lot line. As we mentioned at the outset, there is a non-complying setback. It ranges from about 2.4 meters or 8 feet at the existing south corner of the home to about 1.8 meters, slightly less, 5'11", at the north corner of the existing home. So due to the angle of that east lot line, aligning the addition with the existing dwelling actually ever so slightly improves the non-complying setback. Folks, I'm talking literally inches here. The reduced yard does still manage to provide for sufficient passage between the front and rear yards. That said, there is quite a spacious yard on the other side or the opposite side of the home that also serves that purpose. Adequate space in that reduced side yard to perform maintenance on the east side of the proposed addition. The reduction isn't anticipated to impact any drainage function between the two properties. The siting of the addition doesn't encroach on the front yard. There's a substantial front yard left as a result of this additional residential space to be constructed. And that will be helpful if there's a need to upgrade the existing septic system. And this is just an indication of the floor plan that's proposed. We're looking specifically at the upper part of this slide that I'm highlighting in with the laser pointer. So at the upper part of the left floor plan is the garage layout, double bay, and then the upper loft space with passage as we come to the midpoint of the photo into the existing dwelling. Again, I just mentioned about the septic system. Currently, it is sited in the front yard. Here's an image that identifies where the septic is approximately. Our supervisor of Part 8 tells us a full evaluation hasn't yet been conducted, so similarly has asked that a condition be placed so that this full evaluation of the impact of the new habitable space be explored fully as a condition of approval before the building permit can be issued. We didn't receive any objections from any other commenting partners, and we didn't receive any written submissions on this application. Let's take a look on the ground. What we see, the temporary storage covered in green and the shipping container between it, a utility trailer, and the home. The image on the left identifies the vegetation between the neighbor on the left and the home subject of this application on the right. The photo on the right is actually taken from the road to give us an idea of the neighbor's home and the existing roof line of the second floor of the home that is subject of this application and the vegetation in between. And Mr. Chair, with that, I'll conclude with our recommendation to approve the side yard reduction. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application. All right. Committee. Mr. Strangway.
As recommended by staff.
Seconded by Ms. Robinson. All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Mr. Strangway.
In favor?
Ms. Robinson.
In favor.
Councillor Yeo.
In favor?
Ms. Archer. Ms. Richardson.
In favor.
And I'm in favor. All right. That motion is carried and the application is approved. And again, just like a well-oiled machine here. All right. We're now dealing with file number D20-2022-074. And this is 756 County Road 24, Geographic Township of Verlem. Ms. Berry.
It is so. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application would facilitate the construction of a new home to replace the existing home on this property. One area of relief needed. So the relief being sought is a reduction in the minimum water setback. The Verlem zoning bylaw requires a water setback of 15 meters. The proposed setback is 14.4 meters for the dwelling and an additional encroachment to 9 meters for the deck. And as we explore this application, we will see that there are existing non-compliances in place, that in fact this application, or as a result of this application, the replacement home actually improves the existing non-compliances. All right, so for the most part, shoreline residential on one side of County Road 24 with some wooded areas, also homes, but on larger lots, and a mix of wooded and agricultural areas on the south part of this stretch of County Road 24. Site plan here indicates the proposal overall. The existing 111 square meter seasonal cottage was built around 1970. There's an 8.3 square meter storage shed, and these two structures are both proposed to be replaced by a new home, about 411.6 square meters. The new home would include an attached garage. There's additionally a 14.8 square meter storage shed that would be constructed on site as well. The improvements are intended to accommodate year-round occupancy with increased habitable space and structural improvements for increased functionality. The redevelopment design intends to use the existing building envelope to the extent possible, keeping the septic system in the front yard, which is where it currently lives. It is evident along this stretch of County Road 24 in particular that the surrounding lots, including actually the lot next door, have been redeveloped in a similar fashion. Sort of older, perhaps seasonal cottages have been converted into year-round homes. This proposal is no exception. And in my opinion, in that regard, contributes to the character overall of the neighborhood. The residential use is permitted in this waterfront designation. The dwelling itself, sticking to sort of a low building profile, single-family home, is within the low-density housing type as well. So these are both upholding the objectives in the waterfront designation. Citing the new home slightly to the interior of the lot helps to improve the development condition at the shoreline. What that does is ensure that the surface water quality is at least maintained, if not improved. Very limited tree removal as a result of this application. Of course, the intention here is to keep as much vegetation in place because it does contribute to the aesthetic, which is of value. Now, the official plan does allow for reconstruction of existing homes within the water setback, provided certain criteria are met. In this case, all of them are met. Given the floor plan of the interior living space that's proposed, we can see that on the site plan. There's no alternative to siting the deck elsewhere, meaning it is an extension out of the living space in the home out to the deck. The structure is away from the high water mark. The rear yard, including the shoreline, has been previously developed and includes hardscaping at the shoreline, already within that 15-meter high water mark. The decking that's proposed is both elevated and unenclosed, so these two features act to minimize the hazard and the extent of impact to the shoreline. The residential use is permitted in the R1 zone in Verulam. Recognizing the existing non-complying water setback, this new proposal does improve that non-compliance by shifting the dwelling and the decking further away from the shoreline than at present. The size of the septic system does prevent any further adjustment of the dwelling footprint towards the road. We had spoken at some length with the designer, looking at different options to re-site the home potentially. Also in correspondence back and forth with our septic division, understand that septic system is designed as it needs to be and as it should be to accommodate the home, and so no further adjustments are available. That notwithstanding, we still support the improvement of the water setback in the rear yard, even though this application still seeks some relief from that water setback. There is still the natural rear yard setback that is maintained to allow for that amenity space in the rear yard. Also, as you'll find in your reports, a number of elevations to demonstrate the owner's intended new home design, and some photos to give us an idea of the evaluation that we've taken you through in the report here. So it's the on the left, the white home tucked back behind some of this vegetation. Laser pointer I will not rely on, and just use the description of the white home tucked in behind the vegetation. The second photo on the right that identifies the rear of the dwelling and what the existing hardscaped shoreline looks like. Currently, I'm standing at the edge of the dock, and we can see the current storage shed and the extent of the existing decking at the rear of the home. And both of these images give us an idea of, again, the lawn behind the home, the existing encroachment into the water setback, which would be improved as a result of this application. All right, we did not receive any concerns or objections from any of the commenting agencies. Conservation Authority provided their comments after we had submitted the report for publication, and just remind us, as is evidenced in our mapping, this area is regulated by their agency. So regulations permit will be required prior to the issuance of a building permit. Together with the permit, will need to, permit application will need to have some supplementary information provided. The designer is aware of this. This could include things like the submission of drawings or surveys illustrating the finished floor elevation of the new home to ensure that it's 0.3 meters above the Sturgeon Lake high water level. And then their comments go on to define what that is. So this is not new news to us. I share this for information for the committee's purposes in making their decision. We recommend that this application be approved. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Are there any questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? And your name, sir?
My name is David Rolfe.
All right, go ahead, sir.
I really have nothing to add. Lee, thank you very much for all your work on this and working with me on this. I think she's touched on everything that needs to be talked about. So thank you all for your time.
All right, and thank you for taking the time, sir. Are there any questions of the speaker? All right, being none. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application. All right, being none, do I have a mover? Ms. Richardson, do I have a seconder? Councillor Yeo seconds. Are there any comments with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, Ms. Richardson.
In favor?
Councillor Yeo.
In favor?
Ms. Robinson.
In favor?
Ms. Archer. In favor. Mr. Strangway.
In favor.
And I'm in favor. All right. The application is approved, sir.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Now, dealing with file number D20-2022-075, and this is 115 Gilson Street, Geographic Township of Mariposa. Need I say who it is? But anyway, I will. Ms. Berry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unless you'd like to pick another member of the team here, I'll go ahead and take this one too. So the application before us here at 115 Gilson Street would facilitate the construction of a shed, a detached accessory building. It's a shed the size of about 22.3 square meters, 240 square feet. And one area of relief needed to get this shed moved onto the site. The zoning bylaw requires a side yard setback of 2 meters, and what is proposed in this case is 1 meter. Okay, a fairly new subdivision governed by Official Plan Special Policy Area or Development Plan Area DP4. The single detached dwelling was built in 2019. Now, it has an attached three-car garage now, and in the perpetual pursuit for more storage area, we received this application, notwithstanding the owner's use of the garage to be able to store 4 vehicles and some tools. There aren't any other accessory buildings on the lot. Now, a temporary storage shelter was erected to house some lawn maintenance, garden equipment. The idea is that this temporary storage shelter would be removed to make way for the new shed. And the new shed is proposed to contain a number of pieces of equipment, a riding lawnmower, a push mower, a robot mower, snow blowers, a utility terrain vehicle, the toys as the owners described to us, with a plow. To help maintain this property. And of course, garden tools that can't otherwise be accommodated inside. The shed itself, and we'll see an image of that here, is prefabricated, constructed to Ontario Building Code standards, using quality materials in colors that, in the opinion of the owners, complement the home. We don't disagree. Take a look here at a couple of photos of the site. The driveway terminates at the garage. Located on a gravel pad right beside the garage is a trailer, RV, recreation vehicle. The trailer is proposed to be relocated to a permitted secondary point of access. This is a corner lot, and there is a secondary point of access and parking pad, and that's where the RV is proposed to be sited. Now, placing the shed beside the garage allows for safe access to the main doors while maintaining an appropriate setback from the house, creating a convenient direct approach from the street, and doesn't encumber the open space amenity of the rear yard, which the owners highly value. The use of the property for this shed is permitted in the site-specific residential zoning. Now, the trailer that's there has been parked in the location that you see here in this photo, and we'll take another couple of images of it here from both right behind the house, side angle, and from further back in the rear yard. It has been sited there since the owners took possession of the home. There is no further encroachment proposed to where that RV is currently parked. We can see already the gravel sort of pad that is there is contained by a small retaining wall and really represents where that shed would be located. In my opinion, the setback of 1 meter that is proposed will still provide sufficient room to pass between the front and rear yards if needed to on that side of the new garage, the new shed. It also provides for sufficient area, if needed, to address any exterior maintenance of the shed. And there is currently, we can see, perhaps a little better in the first picture, a wooden fence that has been erected between the neighbors. And this does function to buffer the uses to some extent. As a result of circulation, no concerns or issues indicated from our commenting partners or from the public. We did get comments from the Conservation Authority as well, just indicating that although a portion of the lot is regulated, no permit is required for this application. And with that, Mr. Chair, we reiterate our recommendation to approve the side yard reduction. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Questions of the planner? An easy group today. All right, is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? It's one of those days. Nobody wants to be here. All right. Is there anyone online? Me too. Anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Mrs. Archer, as printed. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Strangway. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All right. Mrs. Archer. Mr. Strangway.
In favor.
Ms. Richardson.
In favor?
Councillor Yo.
In favor?
Ms. Robinson.
In favor?
Okay, I'm in favor. All right. That motion passes. The application is approved. All right. We're now moving on to deferred applications. And this is file number D20-2022-053, 110 Wilkinson Drive, Geographic Township of Somerville. Ms. Berry.
All right, and we will end things here on another high note, an application with a recommendation for approval. This application has been quite involved. The relief that is being sought to facilitate the reconstruction of the home that's currently there, and probably better characterize that as simply replacing the deck on the back of the home. Would need relief from the water setback to do that. So in order to build a new home and deck as proposed in the elevations that we'll look at here in a moment, we need to address the reduction of the minimum water setback. So Somerville zoning bylaw requires a minimum water setback of 15 meters. That actually can drop down to 13.5 meters because of permissions to encroach into that setback from deck and steps. So notwithstanding the permission in the bylaw to further encroach into the water setback, this proposal results in a 10.9 meter setback at the north corner and a 6.9 meter setback at the south corner of the proposed deck. Currently, and we'll see this indicated on the site plan, here, that dashed line at the lowest part of the existing footprint indicates to us that the existing footprint is already closer to the shoreline that is than what is proposed at about 10 meters, or actually just under 10 meters. All right. So, may recall, this was in front of the committee a couple of months ago. As a result of circulation, Kawartha Conservation identified the presence of karst topography. And to remind us what that is, it's unstable bedrock. It is a natural heritage feature of provincial significance. And this warranted further evaluation to determine the merits of undertaking a geotechnical study. Such a study would address all hazards or risks associated with unstable bedrock. Some of these, or the most common types of risks, would be things like sinkholes, bedding plane, fractures, slumping, differential settlement. We've learned a lot in the last couple of months about these particular features. In order to sort of facilitate this discussion that was happening at that time amongst our staff, Kawartha Conservation, and the owners, the committee agreed to a deferral that was at the August 18th meeting for a period of not more than 4 months, returning at the latest the last meeting of this year, which would be December 1st. KRCA ended up recommending that such an assessment be prepared, and that has now been completed, Mr. Chair, which is why we are back here in front of you presenting our recommendation to support this variance. So the owners are proposing to tear down the existing 60 square meter bungalow that contains an existing crawl space. The dwelling dates to approximately 1960s, deficient with respect to current Ontario Building Code standards. The replacement home is about 150 square meters, still a bungalow, but with a basement, and that would contain the utilities that serve the home: the furnace, water, sewage pumps. For some site context, of course, this is a waterfront lot. We are looking for a reduction in the water setback. So the way that the lot is comprised geographically, a gentle slope from the road midway through the property, where the slope increases towards the base of the embankment, then gently slopes out to the shoreline. There's a mix of mature conifers, deciduous trees, shrubs, and grasses across almost the entirety of the lot. The design, of course, where the buildings aren't, the design choices are sensitive to the existing topography. They certainly attempt to preserve the vegetation on site, the natural features, and they do this by reusing the existing footprint to the extent possible. And I'll just give us a reminder of, again, the extent of vegetation and wooded area on this lot by looking at the aerial map on the slide. In addition to the karst hazard that KRCA had flagged, the property is also within vicinity of, well, certainly 4 Mile Lake, so this means fish habitat. The buffer of the significant woodland, this is a natural heritage feature, and the boundary of the 4 Mile Lake Management Plan, indicating a highly vulnerable aquifer, this being a water resource of provincial interest. Those natural heritage features notwithstanding, an EIS or an environmental impact study was not recommended as needed to address any features. The proposal and the construction stays entirely outside of these natural heritage features, though they are in proximity. KRCA, as we know, did recommend the preparation of this technical site-specific geotechnical study to demonstrate that all hazards and risks associated with the unstable bedrock could be adequately addressed. The owners retained a geological and environmental consulting firm, Grace and Associates Incorporated, who prepared the karst assessment report. This was completed and provided to us in the Conservation Authority earlier in October. The report itself includes a comprehensive desktop study, that's a literature review, geological mapping, water well records, contractors' reports, as well as a preliminary site inspection and an assessment of prevailing site conditions. It goes further, of course, to provide recommendations for how the site should develop based on their evaluation of the geological factors that they both reviewed and obviously observed on site. The Conservation Authority is satisfied that the report is appropriate. It addresses the geotechnical concerns that they had. They agree with the conclusions of the report that the intended use of the site for this residential redevelopment would not pose a risk from a geotechnical perspective, and it also wouldn't impact the groundwater recharge quantity or quality. In other words, the ability for the lot to sustain itself that way. The Conservation Authority recommends that all the requirements and recommendations contained in the consultant's report be implemented in the construction phase of development. We have captured this recommendation through Condition 1 when we refer to Appendix E, and we'll go through the designs here, the elevations that are in your report. Excuse me just for a moment. My apologies. Appendix E in the report, as you'll see, is simply the cover page of the consultant's report. The recommendations from that report are embedded in the report itself, and we'll conclude and touch on the nature of the recommendations from that report. As we described through the report, we'll just take you through some visuals of the site. Standing at the road as we enter the site, we can see the change in grade, the slope out to the lake. Here's some visuals from the rear of the property and the existing deck and encroachment into the landscaped rear yard. The residential use and continued use of this property is permitted in the waterfront designation. There's a special policy area overlay as well in the official plan, and this special policy area describes policies for development in proximity to 4 Mile Lake, so specific to this geographic region of the city. The policies describe the watershed, the geological landforms, and the at-capacity, quote-unquote, shoreline residential community, as well as what sort of opportunities are available for new recreational development. The karst assessment report addresses all of the special policy area policies. The official plan permits the reconstruction of existing homes within the water setback, provided certain criteria are met. These criteria are met, in my opinion, through this application. Given the floor plan of the adjacent interior living space, there is no alternative to site a new deck elsewhere. It certainly makes sense. It's logical to have the ability to walk from the interior living space out to the deck. The expansion is away from the high water mark by about 3 meters. The rear yard, including the shoreline, has, as we can see, been previously developed, and it includes steps and a stone retaining wall already within that high water mark area. The deck is elevated. It is now, it will continue to be as a result of the reconstruction. And so the elevated nature and the unenclosed nature of the deck minimize the extent of its impact to the shoreline and any hazard risk to damage either of the deck itself, but also the integrity of the shoreline itself. The residential use permitted in the LSR zone, much like the evaluation of the official plan policies, the deck is in keeping within, when we look at the built form through the trees in the aerial mapping, is sort of indicative of like development on adjacent lots, which upholds the character of how the rear yards are used in this area. We know as well the angled shoreline contributes to the extent of relief sought, meaning it is an angled shoreline, and hence the differential of relief being sought from 6.3 meters to, at its furthest extent, 10.97 meters. Mr. Chair, before I begin to lose my voice here, I'll just touch on the recommendations which we see on page 5 of the report, again captured in condition 1 and is indicated in Appendix E, which means that prior to the issuance of a building permit, our colleagues in the building division must have regard for these recommendations. And I'll just highlight that it is recommended by the consultants that the proposed redevelopment areas be cleared of all topsoil to expose the bedrock prior to the construction of the footings and the foundation. Further recommendation to only use clean inert fill to provide proof of the origin and quality of the fill material. These are comments that we conventionally also see from the Conservation Authority when they're involved in permit issuance, so that certainly aligns with their objectives as well. We did not receive any concerns or issues, any written submissions from the neighbors. Our commenting agencies further did not indicate any concerns or issues with the reconstruction of the home, but most importantly, the purpose of this application being the deck encroachment in the water setback. And with all of that said, Mr. Chair, we will reiterate our recommendation to approve this reduced setback to accommodate this new home build. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Are there any questions of the planner? Being none, is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
I'm here. I can't start my video.
All right, that's okay, ma'am. Just give us your name first, if you would.
Okay, my name's Pauline Smogy, and first of all, I'd really like to thank Leah Berry for walking us through this, and we really greatly appreciated it, and thank you for coming out today.
Well, thank you very much for your comments. They are very much appreciated, I can assure you, and thank you for taking the time to speak to us. Is there anything further you wish to add?
No, we're just grandparents who, we live here full time, and we're new grandparents, and so we're looking forward to sharing our home with the grandkids.
Well, congratulations on being new grandparents. That's always a milestone, so yeah, good stuff. Alrighty then, are there any questions of the applicant? Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to this application? Got an easy day, committee. All right, where are we? Who wants to give me a hand here? Councillor Yeo, seconded by Mr. Strangway. That's as printed. And are there any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, Councillor Yo,
In favor.
Mr. Strangway,
In favor?
Ms. Robinson,
In favor?
Ms. Archer, Ms. Richardson,
In favor?
and I'm in favor. All right, that motion is carried. Your application is approved, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
No, Mr. Chair, I don't believe so.
Are you talking? I can't hear anything.
There's just too many buttons around here, that's all I can say. All right, Ms. Richardson and Mr. Strangway made a motion to adjourn. Now, should I probably don't need a record on this, right? Or do I? No. All right, all those in favor to adjourn? Never lost one. Thank you very much. Okay, just a couple of questions if I may have, Leah. And first of all, Leah, I want to thank you. Your presentations are excellent, and your assistance to this committee is immeasurable. So thank you so much.
Here, 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 here.
Yeah, very much appreciated, I'll tell you. You do a fine job. All right. I guess my question is this. I think some of us, or most of us, or all of us have submitted our statements with respect to whether we wish to continue or don't with the committee. What's the process from here on in?
Sure. And thank you very much for that, Mr. Chair. So we understand that the Clerk's Division will be providing respective staff members involved with the committee work, board work, task force work, with the any and all applications that have been received. I understand the last date is coming up this week. The last date is to make submissions. So not all applications come through staff. It's entirely possible that some applications are submitted directly to the clerk's office, so we won't
that you
have
haven't seen.
a full understanding of who all, as it relates to this committee, has applied formally. And we will be given that formal notice over the next week. The Clerk's Division will provide that information to us. So next step beyond that is reviewing the applications. And if there's a need to interview the potential for new members, should that be the case, an interview panel will be struck. It is entirely possible that yours truly will be one of the interview panel members. We will call in that candidate for an interview and compile our recommendations for council on who should continue on serving this purpose as volunteers. Very important part of the work that we do, culminates in decisions made at this committee. So there, for interviews? Interviews would have to take place within the next several weeks. I won't limit myself to couple, just not totally aware of candidates' potential availability yet, so we want to provide at least a little bit of flexibility. However, we certainly have to provide our referrals to council following their inaugural session. So after the November 15th council meeting, the first regular business meeting would be November 22nd, and the decision on committee appointment would be made that day. So any interviews have to happen safely 2 weeks ahead of that time.
A very selfish reason for me asking that. The deer hunting season is starting in the not too distant future, and I'll probably be away a lot of the time for that. So that's why I asked about when it might be. So, and that's the first 7th of November to, I think it's the 18th or something like that. So.
Okay, should there be a need for an interview, we will take note of that conflict and find some way of working around it.
That I do. Anything further from committee members on that situation?
I just think there might be some safe deer out there if you have to come back for an interview.
They're safe anyway, Emmett. There's no question about that. I see your hand, Janet.
Oh, yes, I was just going to say, I did not reapply to, for another term for the next term. So thank you very much to everybody. It was an honor to be able to sit on this committee since last summer, and a pleasure working with all of you.
Well, I got to admit, we're a bit of a radical bunch. So, but anyway, thank you for your time, and we appreciate your and enjoyed your time on the committee. So, we wish you the very best in any future endeavors.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem at all.
Thanks, Jeff.
Anything further from the committee? How does the December 1st meeting look for? Not that maybe none of us here, but I'm just curious. How does it look for workload on December the 1st?
Mr. Chair, great question. Workload on whom? Workload on what you can expect in terms of application numbers. We are targeting at about 12 to close out the year. Yep. Kicking off new appointment of this committee with a bang.
Now, the only question I have as well further is this. I'm told that most of the committees, and including council, are inviting members of the public, or they can come, members of the public, to the meetings. Personally, given COVID and what is going, the projections for now until the end of the year with COVID, what the other committees do is up to them, but I personally am most uncomfortable if we're inviting members of the public in, and I realize perhaps you can't stop them if that's council's decision, but have there been many complaints with respect to dealing with our, let's call them applicants, witnesses, with respect to having to do it virtually?
Mr. Chair, specifically to that question, we haven't received a single complaint for the current model of electronic meeting participation that we offer and continue to offer, and I understand will continue to offer. So not one complaint. And in fact, we've been commended for accommodating, especially on occasion, not just applicants or members of the public who are unable to attend, or it's perhaps they have any number of conflicts preventing them from attending in person, that in fact they prefer the opportunity to be able to attend virtually. Simplifies things for them and frees up some time for them as well.
This is from an individual perspective, but I think the vast majority out there are treating this far too casually, and we still wear masks wherever we go, my wife and I, and I'm telling you, we're paranoid about it. I don't want to get it. So people say, well, the worst it'll be is like a flu for a week and a half. I don't want the flu for a week and a half. I feel great just the way I am. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I am most comfortable. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I'm most comfortable with this setup. How does everyone feel? You're probably not as paranoid as I am, but that's fine. That's up to you guys. You want to get sick? That's your problem. All right. So anything else on any of those issues? All right. Ms. Williams, fabulous job up there. I tell you, your indications there with respect to yes or no on people helped me immensely. So thank you so much for that. Very, very much appreciated. All right. Anything further? Then we will see you all, if not before, then on December the 1st. How's that? Take care, everyone. Hey?
Bye, everyone.
All me. Oh, geez, well, yeah, I'm being a little presumptuous, aren't I? So, yeah. Well, if we don't ever see any of you again, it was a pleasure. Yeah. Yeah, I'll keep my mask on. All right. And again, Emmett, congratulations. Obviously, you had a very successful campaign, and we're glad to see you back, man.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Take care. All right, folks.
Good night.